So this presentation is just going to run through some of the aspects of HMOs that people get so confused about, namely Article 4 versus licensing. And I want to try to help you clarify and avoid the confusion that occurs. This is not just for new people who are into HMOs for the first time, but also experienced HMO investors and so-called experienced letting agents. My job today is not to really get into the rights and wrongs of Article 4 and licensing. It's just to provide clarity through some facts and examples of my own portfolio in Nottingham, which as a city is usually at the forefront of legislation. The aim is not to frighten you away from HMOs, but to make sure that you're fully compliant as the owner or the manager. So let me just tell you a little bit about my background and why, for example, I know quite a bit about HMOs now. I'm based in Nottingham. I'm a full-time property investor. I also do coaching and mentoring, and I'm one of the writers for the YPN magazine. Currently, I do their book reviews. I've been an HMO landlord since 2010, and predominantly my HMOs are student HMOs, although I do have non-student HMOs as well. I worked for the National Landlords Association for 2 years, so I actually got to know a lot of the legislation as part of my job, including a lot about HMOs. I've given lots of talks on HMOs, and there is often confusion surrounding Article 4 direction, which is all about planning, versus licensing. This talk accompanies an article that will be appearing in YPN. Let's look at some basics of HMOs just so we're all on the same page. So HMOs, or houses in multiple occupancy, are also known as multi-lets, house shares, or a shared house. And predominantly people get this early thing quite incorrect. It's basically property let to 3 or more unrelated people is an HMO. There are different HMO markets. So you could have working people, students, or LHA, local housing allowance. So that is people who are claiming housing benefit. When you're renting out HMOs, typically it tends to be on single tenancies. However, in the instance of student groups, quite often there's only one tenancy contract between 4, 5, or 6 students. And these are called joint tenancies. So often it actually depends on the type of clients that you're actually letting to. Let's look at something about myths about HMO legislation. First up is that Article 4 directions were specifically developed for HMOs. This is not true. It also applies to properties in conservation areas, which are not HMOs. Myth number 2 is that Article 4 means that no HMOs will be allowed. This is also not true. It very much depends on council policy. Myth number 3 is that all HMOs need a license. This is also not true, and you really do need to consult with the council. Myth number 4 is that only larger HMOs need a license. Same again, an HMO is 3 or more unrelated people sharing a house. So do take time to learn your terminology and speak to your local council. The 2 key bits of legislation that we're covering today really is Article 4 direction, which is change of use planning, and also whether you need a license to operate that HMO. So let's look at Article 4 direction first. So a landlord has had the right to convert sort of a family house, or it could be a single let kind of property, to an HMO, and it's been within their what's called general permitted development rights. Where a city or a council has an Article 4 direction in place, all that does is actually remove that general permitted development right. And you will then need planning permission from the local council. This often happens where councils deem an area as being overly saturated with HMOs, but their view on saturation can vary as well. So you really need to speak to your local council. Never forget that the aim of an Article 4 direction, where it's in place, or it's being considered, is to stop new HMOs being set up due to so-called saturation issue. So let's have a look at HMO licensing. And I've used these slides before at other talks. And so it's a bit of a build, just so you get a bit of an idea. The licensing aspects which were changed in 2006 in line with the Housing Act. And really, the first form of licensing that you're going to come across is what's called mandatory licensing. And so that is to 5 or more people, and they have to be living or occupying 3 or more stories, and they need to be in more than one household. The second form of licensing is what I term discretionary, and that's council-led, okay? And that comes in two forms. One is called additional licensing, and that will now extend to all HMOs. So that's, again, 3 or more unrelated sharers, or selective licensing, and that will now include all rental properties. There could be a 1-bed flat, it could be a 2-bed house, anything really. So again, you really have to look at your own area, consult with the council, and do your due diligence as to what exactly is in place in your area. So in summary then, when looking at Article 4 versus licensing, Article 4 is all to do with change of use planning, and licensing is something completely different bits of legislation dealt by different council departments. So the key message from the slides I've showed so far is that Article 4 is not licensing. Okay, so I hope that point's been made clear. Let's focus on Nottingham. And the date at the top of the slide is very, very important. Article 4 came into force in Nottingham on the 11th of March 2012. And in this particular instance, as shown in the map, the council, this is Nottingham City Council, decided to put an Article 4 direction on the whole city. This may be very different to where you are. And there the council might have picked certain streets, certain wards, all sorts of things. This is a very important date to bear in mind, and it means that your HMOs need to have been set up, in my case, by the 11th of March 2012. And if the council seek it, you need to provide proof that they were actually up and running by that date. If not, you could buy something and seek change of use planning permission from the council, and it's up to them, to let you do that. Always remember that the enforcing body, as I call it, for Article 4 legislation and licensing legislation is your council. So do speak to them. So we're now going to go through some case studies, and I want you to take particular note of the date that's on the top of the slide, because I've already told you that Article 4 direction came into force in Nottingham on the 11th of March 2012. And through just some Q&As, I want you to try and answer the questions I'm going to pose. I'm going to give you the scenario through about 3 case studies, and I want you to have a go to see whether you can tell and you can answer some of the questions I'm going to ask. So this is my first HMO that I bought. I purchased it in 2010. It was actually a family living in that house. It was a 4-bed family house with 2 reception rooms, and I changed it to a 5-bed, 3-story HMO. Question 1. Did I need planning permission to change use? The answer is no, I didn't, because it was permitted development at that time. It was pre-Article 4 direction coming into place. Question number 2. Did I need a license to run the HMO? Well, actually it depended. And why it depended at that time was that if I let it to 4 sharers, even over 3 stories, then no, I wouldn't need a license to operate. But if I let it to 5 over 3 floors, yes, I would then need a mandatory license. I hope that's clear from that case study. Let's look at the next case study. So this is now moving on to 2011, still before Article 4 came in. So this was a 6-bed family house with 1 reception room, and I changed it to a 6-bed, 2-story HMO. Question 1. Did I need planning permission to change its use? Answer, no, because it was allowed under permitted development. Article 4 was not in place, so I did not need anybody's planning consent to change the use. Question 2. Do I need a license to run this HMO? Again, it's often not a straightforward answer, and in this case, it depends. A mandatory license is certainly not required, or wasn't required at that stage, but additional licensing is in place in Nottingham. So yes, an additional license is actually required for this property, because Nottingham have brought in additional licensing for pretty much all HMOs. And again, going back to our definitions, that is just 3 unrelated sharers with a bedroom each and sharing facilities. Let's have a look at one more case study. So this is case study number 3, and we're now into 2013. This is after Article 4 has come into place. So I purchased a 6-bed, 3-story HMO which was let to students. It was a bit tired, and these are, the pictures that are shown off a sort of a refurbishment. So the same question, did I need planning permission to change its use? Again, the answer is no. Why? In this case, because it was already an HMO and there was proof that it was running as an HMO. And I could supply that proof to the council if required. Do I need a license to run this HMO? Yes, a mandatory license is required. These are 6 people sharing a property over 3 stories. So in summary then, Nottingham, Article 4 came in on the 11th of March 2012. And if we just look at a hypothetical example where you're going to take, after that date, a 3 to 6 bed family house or a single house, and you now want to change it to a 3 or 6 bed HMO. Will you need planning permission to change use? Yes, you will. We have had Article 4 in place for about 5 years. Would you need a license to run the property? Where we are currently, we are operating in Nottingham, both mandatory and additional licensing. So yes, you will have to apply for a license. But actually, in our case, it'll probably be irrelevant, this whole licensing thing, because our council probably won't allow you to change the use of a family home into an HMO. So you probably won't buy it. When you're looking at trying to make a decision, what I call investment decision tree, whether to purchase or do a rent to rent on a property, here is the flowchart you need to use. Question number 1 you need to ask yourself is it already an HMO? And if you think it is, you need to seek evidence that it's an HMO. In the case of Nottingham, that evidence will have to go right back to before 11th of March 2012. The best form of that evidence from a landlord who may be selling that property is in the form of tenancy agreements. If it's already an HMO and you've got the evidence, you just now need to confirm licensing rules and proceed. The Article 4 bit is not relevant. If it's not an HMO already, you need to ask the question of whether Article 4 is in place. Consult with the council, look on their website, you will find the information. If it is in place, you'll need to speak to the local council to establish whether they will allow you to change the use of a normal house into an HMO. If Article 4 isn't in place, you're good to go. You just need to confirm licensing rules and proceed. So in summary, I've tried to explain to you the differences between Article 4, planning restrictions, and licensing. Just looking at what the future holds, Article 4 will continue to expand across the UK as more and more councils decide that we're getting overly saturated with HMOs. So again, you need to consult with your council. So that's something you can do quite easily in your own area. At the moment, there is mandatory licensing for 5 or more unrelated sharers, but now that is being extended to basically over any number of floors. Okay, so even if you've got 5 people sharing over 2 floors, currently that generally doesn't need a mandatory license. In the future world, it will. The legislation hasn't yet come in, but it will actually extend right across the UK in due course. My feeling is that in the fullness of time, all HMOs, so 3 or more people who are unrelated sharing, the HMO will need licensing. So one has to prepare for these things if you're trying to set HMOs up. As I've said on several points during the presentation, always check with the enforcing body, and that's your council. I hope this slide pack has been useful. It's to be read in conjunction with the article that I've written in YPN. And thank you very much for your attention.